My granddad learned to cut stone, and even cut down. They said he cut stone for the Capitol down in St. Paul, and then he moved up to Grass Lake to a farm up there, and then a fellow in Grafton knew that he cut stone and he wanted a monument, so he took my granddad into making a monument, and that's up in Grafton Cemetery now, the first monument. And then after that it got started, and then my dad and two brothers got involved in it, and so it started out as doing the polishing and sawing and everything. They would haul or ship in granite blocks, and
we had probably 3-4 grocery stores in town, a butcher shop, a locker plant, and probably 5 or 6 different places you could buy gasoline. Now you got one. Well, Santa Day, of course, was an annual thing that for many years we held it at the bank because it was our opportunity to give back to our clients.
Well, I remember my mother would go to Carrie's apparel shop. It was a nice dress shop in Bram, and that would be was on Main Street. I wonder if it wasn't kind of where Carl's barber shop. And then also Severin Matson's store on the corner, which used to be Tucson-Tuck that they tore down. They had in the basement there, they sold shoes and
what was the name of that one, Dorothy?
Severin Matson's.
Okay.
And they sold shoes and they sold material, thread, buttons, everything you know that you need. And I think they had a lot of pride in keeping their businesses going and serving the community and doing the best, that they could. Knew everybody by their first name, I think, most of them.
I would think so.
know.
Particular, because Saturday was our big day out there, and I can remember the day was a bustling community. It had a creamery, it had an egg store, it had a grocery store, when the farmers came in, particularly in the wintertime, a lot of them came with horses and sleighs, because the roads were not hardly passable a lot of times, and they'd come in to have their feed ground and garage, hardware store, and the feed mill. And so it was a bustling little town. And I can remember that we'd get backed up at the feed mill and there might be 8 or 10 units of either pickups or Model A Fords or horse and sleighs waiting to have their feed ground. So it was a busy little place. So
I was probably 14 years old. And like I said, we used to raise a lot of potatoes. And then they get a load on the wagon. And my dad and his brother were farming together. They sent me in and my cousin with this team of horses and a load of potatoes, and I can remember it so well. And then one of them would come in and unload the load for us because we were too young. Because I was going to say, when we come to the potato warehouses, there'd probably be 5-6 loads of potatoes ahead of you. You had to wait your turn to get them unloaded. And then a lot of times the buyer would come and buy them. Different buyers would come and look at the potatoes and buy them before you'd unload, so you went to different warehouses.
If I remember right, my grandfather, Johnson, was a car dealer way back.
Before our time.
Yes, long before our time, and he was the first one to have a car on this side of town. But I don't know what kind it was.
Now you see over there by, right by the railroad tracks, used to be a creamery right there. And we got pictures of it. She figures it's her grandfather with that car.
That has the post office, but there was a big store there. I think it was a department store.
A grocery store in all Goldberg and Anderson.
Yes, and clothes there too, because I can remember, I think Mom was trying on hats or something. We were just little girls.
Had everything.
Actually, my earliest memories of working in the store would have started in about 1935, 36, when I'd be 9 or 10 years old. And at that time, and that was during the Depression, at that time, the community was largely an agricultural community. So a lot of business was transacted with barter. When I was 9 years old, I learned how to candle eggs. People would bring their eggs in at night and on a Saturday night, and we would grade the eggs, and we would give them a written, we called it an egg check. And then they would go and buy groceries or clothing or whatever it was they needed.
Or I remember hearing it from Grandpa when I asked him about the Depression, when the big market crash of October 29,
Yeah.
and his inventory, which was worth this much the day before, all of a sudden was worth this much the next day. And he said, and I asked him, well, how did that make you feel? And he said, well, it really didn't make any difference. I just started selling it at the lower price because I can replace that inventory at the new low cost.
Yeah.
And if the leader didn't have it, you didn't need it. And second, the other one was, we've got it if we can just find it.
Groceries and different things. I know my grandpa, Adolf Reichel, my dad was Lloyd Reichel, and my grandpa Adolf Reichel, his dad, I have memories of him working with Orly Eastland in the Leader, it's now the Leader store. They used to have a grocery store in part of that. And then he worked at a Fairway also on Main Street here, which is by the Lewis store. There was a Fairway grocery store. In 1980, we now have a coffee shop which wasn't here. He's got a good knack for baking. He just enjoys it. And he works with his hands. We do everything the old-fashioned way yet. And a lot of places don't do that anymore. There's more modern ways to do it, but we bake every night. And it's all timed, everything. If you just seen, Herm makes every cookie with his hands. And now my daughter does too, where they just fill the dough in their hands and they just shoot it off, just like that.
A number of years ago, they were just trying to find a way to sort of jazz up the senior center, because everybody calls them senior activity centers, and it's kind of a blah thing. And especially with younger seniors that are retiring, they don't really like the sound of that senior activity center. So they put all the little brains together, and my sister Fran actually is the one that came up with it. She said, instead of Saks on 5th Avenue in New York, let's call ourselves Saks on 3rd.
That's very
There was
clever.
some consternation though, because there were a few people who thought they were saying sex on 3rd.
In the winter times, when I was running that business, I would go over and work over at the Leader store for Neil Johnson in his ski shop. You need to bend over backwards for people when it comes to customer service. Thank them when they come in the door, thank them when they go out the door. I don't care if they bought anything or not. When someone comes in here and they say, I understand you've got a great store here and that's why I'm in here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they've heard that from somebody else.
Right.
I've brought bikes to people's homes. I've gone out and picked people up on the road that have had flat tires. You're just not going to find that anywhere else.
On, and we were getting a car in Cambridge one day, and he was looking at a little empty spot at Dr. Gibbons' eye clinic across the street. So we went in and inquired, and one thing led to another, and soon that became our 4th salon. Fairway Price Trimmers. The amazing part was people could not believe that we were going to be open evenings in Cambridge, because everyone said, well, they roll up the sidewalks by 6 o'clock. So I never was one to go out and buy fancy stuff. I just wanted it to look well and do the job right. And the theater, the theater was real close to us, and that helped our business a lot.
Well, it was owned by V.M. Nelson, and he also had a potato warehouse. At that time, there were 7 or 8 potato warehouses in Granby. It was the hub of the town.
Wow.
An ice cream cone was a nickel at that time.
Oh, so they were able to buy an ice cream from Dad's
Then we
store.
would go to what is now the Brass Rail. It was well, it was a beer parlor at that point, and we could get our ice cream cones. At one time, there was a hotel, there was a hardware store. These both burned down. And there was a post office on the main street in a building, and there was a bank. My father lost money in the bank.
Oh.
The banker walked out to our house the night before it happened and told him what was going to happen, but there wasn't anything he could do about it at that point.
There wasn't any transportation between the college and Grandy, so we hitchhiked.
Well, we moved to Grandy in 1946, right after the war. My dad was always a businessman, so he couldn't wait to get off the farm. When the war was over, I remember we were out in the pasture, jumping up and down, and everybody was running because the war was over. And it took him only about 2 days to have an auction, and he bought the car garage. It wasn't really for sale, but he wanted a business, so he bought it from Arvid Smith, the car dealership. Got an Oliver dealership. Sent me out, I was 12 years old, to demonstrate a tractor and a plow for a guy and plow. I'd stay overnight at this farmer's house and work for a couple days in order to sell the tractor. We converted the meat market to a showroom for Dodge cars, and then we built another new building up on the hill so we wouldn't take away the grocery store, so we had a new meat market building in Grandy.
I think it was just called the Grandy Tavern.
Okay.
An apartment building on the corner there. And it was a dance hall, I don't know what all. I was 4 or 5 years old, lived up in the alley, and I remember that morning I woke up about 3 o'clock and I've been hollering at my mom, fire, fire. I was 16 there, that's when Ennis met me. He was at Carla auction here. And I come walking down, he said he should never waved at me. Didn't know what to call it. We got the brass rail that's up there. It used to be on the old bar on the bottom here.
Right.
And he just said the brass rail. My husband, I think he had a 6th grade education, but he's always been a good worker, you know, and he loves people. I do too. I was out in California maybe 20 years ago, or stopped at the gas station, she lives there. Guy hollered, hi, Grandy Chicken.
Same thing. Customers are the only reason you're in business. Without those people, you're not here. So unless you take care of them,
keep them happy.
It's a lot of work, but it has its good times and bad times, just like any job, kind of. I didn't know if I really had an idea how much work it was going to be or how many hours it was going to be, but it's a commitment, that's for sure.